The first time Emiya met Ikon's mother, the woman held her hand and smiled. "You seem decent," she said, "but let's see how long you last." Emiya thought it was a joke. Years later, she realized it was a warning dressed as a welcome. Emiya thought marriage meant love, so she gave everything. Every morning, she woke up early to prepare breakfast, packed Ikon's lunch, and cleaned the whole house before anyone else was even out of bed. She smiled even when she was tired. She never raised her voice. She made sure Ikon's shirts were always ironed, his favorite meals always ready. She tried so hard to be the kind of wife people praise, but no one noticed, especially not Mari, Ikon's mother. Every time Emiya tried to do something kind, Mari acted like it wasn't enough. She would sit in the corner, watching quietly, and instead of saying thank you, she'd say things like, "Zina would have done it faster," or "Zina adds more spice to her stew." Zina, the so-called family friend who was always somehow around, whenever the family came together, Mari would say things like, "Zina reminds me of myself when I was younger," or "That girl really knows how to hold a home." She said it softly, while Emiya was in the kitchen, scrubbing pots no one thanked her for. Emiya tried harder. She smiled more. She stayed silent, even when things hurt. She listened instead of speaking, served instead of sitting. But no matter how much she gave, she felt invisible. It didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like a test, like she was performing on a stage, one where the judges had already made up their minds. No matter how good she tried to be, she was never good enough. Not for Mari, not with Zina always standing close, laughing loudly, always praised for doing less. Emiya looked at herself in the mirror one day and whispered, "This isn't love. This is a performance." And the worst part, the audience wasn't even clapping. Every time there was a family gathering, whether it was a birthday, a holiday, or just a Sunday lunch, Zina was there, always. Sometimes she arrived before Emiya, sometimes she stayed later, and no one questioned it. No one asked why a woman who wasn't married into the family was always present like she belonged, like she had a place. Zina laughed loudly at every joke, even the ones Emiya didn't find funny. She helped Mari dish out food, even when Emiya had already done all the cooking. And somehow, Zina always found a seat right next to Ikon. Not across, not beside Emiya, but right next to Ikon, their shoulders sometimes touching, their jokes sometimes private. And Mari, she loved it. Her face lit up when Zina walked in. She would pull her in for long hugs and say, "My second daughter is here." She would call her to sit beside her, share secrets, and talk about recipes like they were best friends. It was like Emiya didn't exist in those moments. Emiya noticed how Mari's tone changed around Zina, softer, warmer. She noticed how Mari always saved the best piece of meat for her, how Zina got the family stories, the laughs, the comfort, while Emiya, the actual daughter-in-law, served in silence, cleaned plates, and sat quietly, like a stranger, in her own marriage. One day Mari didn't even try to hide it. She looked at Emiya while Zina was chatting in the kitchen and said, "You should watch how she carries herself. Maybe you'll learn something." Emiya froze. It hit her hard. Not just the words, but the way Mari said them. Calm, confident, and sure. Like she truly believed Emiya was less graceful, less valuable, less everything. And Zina, she acted like she didn't hear, but her smile said she did, and she liked it. Emiya kept asking herself, what did I do wrong? She tried so hard to be respectful, quiet, helpful. She never disrespected Mari. She always showed up, always gave her best. But it wasn't enough, not compared to Zina, the woman who didn't have a ring, didn't live in the house, didn't cook a single meal, but somehow already held the title. Zina had become the daughter-in-law without even wearing a wedding dress. And no one, not even Ikon, thought that was strange. When Mari fell sick, Emiya didn't even think twice. She moved into the guest room just to be closer. She made hot soups every morning, washed Mari's clothes, cleaned her room, gave her medicine on time, and even massaged her feet every night. She left her own job behind for weeks just to care for the woman who never once called her daughter. Emiya did it all out of duty, but also out of hope. Hope that maybe this would change something. Maybe Mari would finally see her heart. Maybe, just maybe, she would be accepted. But even in sickness, Mari's heart didn't change. Almost every evening, after finishing her food, Mari would look at Emiya and ask one question. "Has Zina called today?" She never said thank you, never asked how Emiya was holding up, never even smiled in appreciation. Just that one question about Zina. At first, Imya stayed quiet. She thought Mari was confused or just used to Zina's constant presence. But it happened again, and each time, it hurt more than the last. Imya would be sitting beside her, wiping her forehead, and Mari would whisper, "Zina's voice brings peace. She always knows what to say." Sometimes Mari would pick up her phone and scroll through old photos with Zina smiling as if those moments were treasures. Imya tried not to let it show, but her chest felt heavier every day. Then came the night that broke her. Mari had fallen asleep after dinner. Imya sat quietly, just watching her breathe, hoping for some rest. But suddenly, Mari began to talk in her sleep. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper. "Ikon deserves someone stronger," she said. "Someone like Zina." Imya froze. Her hands stopped moving. Her heart dropped to the floor. The woman she was sacrificing everything for didn't even want her for her son. Even in sleep, Mari's heart belonged to someone else. Tears welled up in Imya's eyes, but she wiped them quickly. She didn't want to break down there. Not in that room. Not beside someone who couldn't see her worth. She stood up, adjusted the blanket gently over Mari's legs, and walked out of the room without making a sound. That night, something inside her changed. She had given everything, her time, her energy, her kindness, hoping to earn love. But love should never have to be earned like that, especially not from someone who couldn't even say her name without comparing it to Zina's. Imya didn't want to ask. She held her questions for weeks, maybe months, but some things can't stay buried forever. One night, while folding laundry beside Ikon, she finally said it, softly, carefully, like she was afraid of breaking the air. "Is there something between you and Zina?" Ikon didn't get angry. He didn't even look shocked. He laughed, a short, sharp laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Are you jealous now?" he said, shaking his head like she'd told a silly joke. Imya smiled a little too, but it didn't reach her heart. Inside, her chest tightened, because Ikon's laugh didn't feel honest. It felt like a wall, like something to stop her from asking again. And maybe he thought she'd let it go, that she'd move on and pretend everything was fine. But Imya couldn't unsee what she'd already seen. She saw the way his face changed when Zina walked into a room, the way his eyes followed her, even when Imya was standing right there. She noticed how he laughed louder at Zina's jokes, how he leaned in closer to her stories, how he always found a reason to sit near her during gatherings. She had watched him come home tired, barely saying a word to her, but the moment Zina called or messaged, his face lit up like a boy hearing from his first crush. It wasn't just her imagination. It wasn't just insecurity. Jealousy becomes real when you start to feel invisible in your own marriage. Imya began to notice the little changes. Ikon stopped complimenting her. He didn't ask how her day went. He'd forget things she told him, important things. But when Zina spoke, he remembered every word. He quoted her often, even laughed about things only they shared. Still, whenever Imya brought it up, Ikon brushed her off. "You're thinking too much," he'd say. "Zina is like family, but even family doesn't get that look. The look he gave Zina when she wasn't watching. The kind of look that held too much softness, too much want." Imya wasn't foolish. She wasn't insecure. She was a woman who knew when her place was being taken, even if no one said it out loud. And maybe Ikon never admitted anything. Maybe he thought denial was enough. But Imya had learned something stronger than words. Eyes don't lie. And her husband's eyes had already chosen someone else. Imya's birthday came, and for once, she allowed herself to feel a little excited. Maybe this would be the day she felt truly seen. The family had planned a small party at Mari's house. Imya didn't expect much, just some love, some smiles, and maybe a sweet word or two from her husband. When she arrived, the decorations were already up. Balloons, food, laughter, everything looked perfect on the outside, but something felt strange. Something felt off. The moment she walked in, her eyes landed on Zina. She was wearing a bright dress, smiling wide, walking around like she owned the day. Imya tried to push the feeling away. She greeted everyone politely, hugged Mari, and sat quietly beside Ikon. But Ikon didn't look at her. His eyes were already focused somewhere else, on Zina. Then came the cake, a beautiful one, full of colors and details. People clapped and complimented it. "Zina made it herself," Mari announced proudly. Everyone cheered. Imya stood still. Her birthday cake, made by Zina? Imya smiled softly, pretending it didn't bother her. She sat, waiting. Maybe Ikon would pull her close. Maybe he would say something kind. Maybe he would remind her this was her day. But then Zina stood up and began speaking. She gave a speech, a whole speech, about Imya. But somehow, the words felt more about herself than anything else. She spoke of memories, stories Ikon had told her, and even shared a joke that only Ikon laughed at. Imya looked around. No one noticed how uncomfortable she was. No one saw how her fingers trembled slightly on her lap. Finally, it was time to cut the cake. Everyone gathered. Cameras came out. Imya waited beside Ikon, expecting him to turn and hand her the knife. But instead, Ikon turned to Zina. "Here," he said, placing the knife gently in her hand. "You made it. You cut it." The whole room clapped, except Imya. She stood there frozen. The moment didn't make sense. It was her birthday, her celebration, her husband. Yet Zina was in her place, holding the knife, smiling beside Ikon like it was her party. And no one, not a single person, noticed the pain in Imya's eyes. She had been replaced. Not with words, not with a fight, not even with a goodbye. Just replaced, silently, right in front of everyone. And the saddest part, they all acted like it was normal, like this was how things were supposed to be. That day, Imya stopped expecting anything, because her place had already been given to someone else. Imya had reached her breaking point. She couldn't pretend anymore. The smiles were fake, the silence was heavy, and her heart felt tired. After everything, after the way she was treated, after being ignored on her own birthday, after watching her husband hand her place to another woman, she knew something had to change. So late one night, while the house was quiet, Imya packed a small bag, just a few clothes, her documents, some money. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to shout or cry. She just wanted peace. She just wanted to breathe again. As she walked toward the door, her hands shaking slightly, she heard the sound of slippers behind her. She turned, and there stood Mari. The older woman looked at her, not surprised, not angry, just firm. She stood in front of the door, arms crossed, blocking the way. "Where do you think you're going?" Mari asked coldly. Imya swallowed. "I'm leaving." Mari stepped closer. "You're not." Imya looked her in the eye, trying to stay calm. "I can't live like this anymore. You don't want me here. Neither does Ikon." But Mari didn't move. Instead, she said something that cut deeper than anything Imya had heard before. "I raised my son too well for you to throw him away. You'll stay. You'll behave. You'll endure." Those words hit Imya like cold water. Endure? Is that what they expected of her? To keep suffering quietly? To keep playing a role that left her empty inside? She stood there for a moment, frozen. Then, slowly, she stepped back, set her bag down, and went into the guest room. Not because she had changed her mind, but because she needed a better plan. Because she realized leaving wouldn't be easy. Not with people like Mari around. Not with a husband who wouldn't stand up for her. That night, Imya didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and asked herself, is this what marriage is supposed to be? The answer was clear. Endurance isn't love. Silence isn't peace. Staying in a place where you're unwanted doesn't make you strong. It slowly makes you disappear. So while she didn't walk out that night, something inside her shifted. She may have stayed in that house, but her heart was already leaving. Piece by piece, step by step, she was taking it back. She would find her voice again. She would find her strength, because staying didn't mean surrender. It meant planning, quietly, carefully, and next time, when she walked out, no one would be able to block the door. It was a Saturday afternoon when the knock came. Imya wasn't expecting anyone, but something in her chest felt strange, like her heart already knew. She opened the door, and there they were, Ikon and Zina, standing side by side, smiling. Zina was holding a food container and dressed in a white lace gown. Not casual white, no. It was soft, delicate, and clearly chosen with care. The kind of dress that makes a statement without saying a word. Her hair was done, her nails polished, and her face was glowing. But what stood out more than anything was her smile. That smile, the kind that wasn't kind at all. The kind that said, I've already taken what was yours. It wasn't loud, but it spoke louder than anything else in that moment. Peace offering, Zina said sweetly, handing over the meal. I thought we could start fresh. Imya looked at her, then at Ikon, who didn't say a word. He didn't even try to meet her eyes. He just stood there, quietly, letting Zina lead. Imya took the container with steady hands. but inside her heart was shaking. She forced a smile. "Thanks," she said. "That's thoughtful." But it wasn't thoughtful. It was a performance, a warning. Zena had already started behaving like the wife. She didn't need permission. She didn't wait for approval. She wore the color of weddings, peace, and purity. But in that moment, it felt like a color of victory. Ymir stepped aside and let them in. She didn't want to, but she needed to see everything clearly now. She watched how Zena placed the food on the table, how she walked around the kitchen like it was her own, how Ikon didn't stop her. Zena laughed at something Ikon whispered, and when she looked at Ymir again, the message was clear. "You're just a guest now." Ymir stood quietly, her heart breaking in silence. She had fought so hard, stayed so long, and hoped so deeply. But this was the moment she realized the truth. Zena wasn't trying to take her place. Zena already had. And Ikon, he didn't stop it. He allowed it. He chose it. That white dress wasn't for peace. It was a silent celebration. A quiet wedding with no vows, no ring, but a husband who was already hers in every way that counted. Ymir didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply smiled back, a small, tired smile, because now she knew the war was already lost, and it was time to stop fighting. Ymir had stayed quiet for too long. She had swallowed every insult, smiled through every disrespect, and stood in the background while another woman took her place. But something in her had started to break, and this time, it didn't heal. It changed. The final moment came one evening. She and Ikon sat across from each other in the living room. The air was cold between them. Zena was in the kitchen, humming like she belonged. Mari sat nearby, watching like a guard dog. Ymir spoke softly, trying one last time. "Ikon, is this really what you want?" Ikon didn't look up. "Ymir," he said, "if you leave, we'll replace you tomorrow." It hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes shifted to Mari, who nodded slowly and added, "You were lucky we even accepted you." Zena didn't say a word. She just stood there, silent, holding a glass of water like this wasn't about her. But her silence was loud, too loud. Ymir took a deep breath. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She reached into her bag, pulled out the divorce papers and placed them on the table. "I've already signed," she said calmly. "You can file them tomorrow." Mari raised an eyebrow. Ikon blinked, confused. Zena looked down. "But," Ymir continued, "before you do, I want one last family meeting. Everyone should be there. Aunties, uncles, cousins, all the people who've been watching from the sidelines." Ikon frowned. "Why?" "Because I want them to see the new daughter-in-law," Ymir replied. "The one you've all been waiting for. The one who sat beside me, behind me, and now in front of me." She looked straight at Zena. She deserves a front seat. This has been her performance too, after all. Mari opened her mouth to object, but Ymir had already turned away. There was nothing left to say. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about begging. It was about truth. It was about letting everyone see what they had turned her life into. A stage, a play, a show where she was written out without warning. So she walked away from that room with her head high, not because she wasn't hurt, but because she finally stopped trying to prove her worth to people who were already blind to it. She had signed the papers, but she hadn't lost. Not yet. The morning of the divorce hearing was calm, almost too calm. Ymir dressed simply, her face bare, her heart steady. She had spent nights preparing for this moment, not with anger, but with quiet strength. She had cried enough. She had begged enough. Today she was done with all that. When she entered the courtroom, the first thing she noticed wasn't the judge or the papers. It was the scent in the air. A perfume, her perfume, the one she had worn every day during the first years of her marriage. The one Ikon used to say made the whole house smell like love. Ymir stopped for a second and turned her head. Zena was already seated, wearing it, the white lace again, hair perfectly styled, and that same smile, the one that didn't reach the eyes, the one that always said, "I got what I wanted." Ikon sat beside her, his face unreadable. He didn't even look at Ymir properly, just a quick glance, like she was already a memory, like she had never been the woman who stood by him during his worst days. Ymir didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She walked to the front, stood straight, and handed the judge the signed documents. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. She was done with being small. After handing the papers, she turned, not to Ikon, to Zena. The room was quiet, but Ymir's words filled every corner. "You always wanted to sit in my place," she said calmly. with a soft, tired smile. So sit there now, while I walk out free. Zena froze. Her smile cracked just a little. Ekon looked down. And Mari, who had come to sit at the back, shifted uncomfortably. But Imya didn't wait for a response. She picked up her bag and walked toward the exit, heels clicking softly with each step. No drama, no shouting, just peace. As she reached the door, she paused for a moment. She breathed in the scent, the perfume Zena had stolen. And for the first time, it didn't smell like love. It smelled like goodbye. She walked out, not looking back even once. Because this time, she wasn't walking away in pain. She was walking away in freedom. Months passed. The silence Imya once feared had now become her peace. No more whispers comparing her to Zena. No more cold eyes watching her every move. No more pretending to be okay. She had built a quiet life, simple, soft, and honest. She finally felt like herself again. Then one afternoon, her phone rang. She saw the name on the screen, Ekon. She let it ring a few times before answering. Not because she was afraid, but because she wasn't in a hurry anymore. When she finally picked up, his voice sounded tired. Not the confident Ekon she once knew, but someone worn out, like he was carrying the weight of his own choices. Imya, he said, can we talk? She didn't say much. She just listened. He told her Zena had changed. She was always upset now, always questioning him. She wanted more, more, more. The peace he thought he would find with her had turned into noise, constant noise. Even Mari didn't say much these days. The house was cold. The warmth was gone. Imya didn't interrupt. She let him speak. Finally, he said, I don't know how we got here. You were never the problem. She smiled quietly, not with pride or revenge, but with clarity. You didn't lose me to Zena, she said gently. You lost me to peace. He stayed silent on the other end. Peace doesn't compete, she added. It doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't stand in the shadows waiting to be chosen. There was nothing left to say after that. Imya didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply ended the call. No anger, no pain, just silence. The kind that comes when healing is complete. The kind that says, I was never the spare. I was the test, and you failed. If you've ever been made to feel like an option, not a priority, remember this. You are not the backup plan. You are the blessing they fumbled. Share this if you've ever walked away not in anger, but in peace.